Today we have Liz Stokes talking for us today, doing the presentation Hammer Time, Building Carpentry Communities in Australia. Liz Stokes is an enthusiastic champion of building community and peer learning and open research tools and software. At the Australia Research Data Commons, they lead a national partnership with the Carpentries, an organisation which aims to effectively teach foundational coding and data science skills to researchers. Liz's talk will discuss why people become Carpentries instructors, what programming challenges researchers face, and what key things make a difference when you're building a supportive community. Please welcome Liz.
Thank you, everyone, and thanks for bearing with me as we start a bit late. That's my fault, I'm perennially running late. So, Wominjeka, which means welcome, I'm excited to learn. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung people of the Kulin Nations, the traditional custodians of the lands of Naarm. I also want to extend that acknowledgement to the traditional custodians of the lands where you're from. I grew up on stolen Wiradjuri country and I live and work on the Gadigal lands of the Eora people. I pay my respects to elders past and present and extend my respects to any First Nations people in the room today. Okay, so my keenest desire for the next 45 minutes is to make good on all my promises in the abstract that I sent earlier this year. Caveat, that might not happen, but let's see. That's what question time is for, right? Okay. There must be something, that acceptance means there must be something in the abstract that was intriguing or particularly wrong. Perhaps like asserting that stop, collaborate and listen are indeed, in fact, not MC Hammer lyrics, but Vanilla Ice. So I'm really looking forward to what your opinions about this is and what questions around this partnership you may have. In fact, yeah. So, look, I started with MC Hammer and this idea of hammer time as an appropriate metaphor for the Carpentries, which are in fact not a carpentry physical tooling with wood process, but an organisation that teaches foundational coding and data science skills to research communities worldwide. I would like you to consider me as something like a theremin player for the purposes of this talk. You know, I am merely a conductor. Perhaps I could say I'm a semiconductor. Yes, you're with me. Good. Okay, so of ideas, connections which represent the shared endeavours of the many wonderful community volunteers and participants that are all involved in the Carpentries and beyond. Okay, so my model for today's talk is a mullet, as you can see there. Okay, the mullet, this, also from the 80s and indeed some of the early 90s, mullet was a popular hairstyle, and it was often referred to as something where you had business in the front and a party in the back. And so that's my model for today. So the business in the front is going to tell you a lot about ARDC, my organisation, tell you about the Carpentries, one of our ARDC recent products called Dresser, and then do the party in the back, which is the extended metaphor of stop, collaborate and listen. Okay, stop, which is why researchers want to become Carpentries instructors, collaborate, what programming challenges do researchers face, and thinking about what key things make a difference when building community. That last one, listen, is kind of peppered throughout the talk and is not any way a reason because I couldn't finish the last slide. Okay, so what's the Carpentries and ARC got to do with it? That's a reference to Tina Turner. And that's how I learn, actually. If I can make a pun or a joke about something, even if it's terrible, especially if it's terrible, I know that I'm learning. And to me, that emphasises one of the really important things about skill sharing and something that is critical to building trainer capacity. And that is that enablement is a social endeavour. So the problem that we're trying to solve is that there is a big computational skills gap for researchers across Australia, indeed the world, and we want to make it easier for them to do the right thing in terms of managing their research data and the software that they write to do things with do things with that data. I'd like to give a shout out to Donna Benjamin here, for introducing that concept of enablement, which refers to that social side of upskilling a workforce. So let's get down to business. So the next few slides are going to be fairly sort of business heavy and feature a lot of logos. Who here has heard of the ARDC? Can I see a hand? A smattering. Okay, cool. A bit groovy. Okay, so I'm gonna dive into some of our who we are and our reason for being. The ARDC was established under the Australian Government's National Collaborative Research Infrastructure Strategy, we know this as NCRIS, in 2019. This national research infrastructure could be a physical instrument like an electronic microscope, or it could be a service like manufacturing of nanotechnology. It could be digital like cloud compute, as it tends to be bigger in scale than any single or group of universities could provide their researchers. ARDC is now a not-for-profit company limited by guarantee, which, along with 25 other organisations supported by NCRIS that you can see here, provide national research infrastructure for Australian researchers. Interesting fact for this community here, the directors, these NCRIS directors, recently put out a paper calling for a separate category or employment category for research infrastructure specialists, arguing that the current EBAs work well for professional staff and academic staff at universities, but they don't respond to the particular needs and career development of people working in research infrastructure. So when I eventually share these slides, there's a link there to that paper, which you may find interesting. Okay. So we have, who are these member organisations? We have 21 member organisations, 9 of which host our staff across Australia. So what is a Research Data Commons? Okay, so while we're called the Australian Research Data Commons, what we want to do is build national Research Data Commons for Australia. Our purpose, as we see it, is to provide Australian researchers with the competitive advantage through data, and we accelerate research and innovation by driving excellence in the creation, analysis, and retention of high-quality data assets. No one can do any of this unless they have the skills to use that infrastructure, which is where we come in. I work for the Skills and Workforce Development team in the trainer, and my focus here on this wheel is over in Section 5, Community Leadership, with respect to the trainer communities of Australia. We have found that the training community for digital research skills is often disconnected, time poor, siloed within research institutions, and unable to find best practice training materials. At this point, I would also like to give a shout out to some of the open credentials of ARDC, and that is to flag here that our Nectar team, who run a research cloud, use OpenStack and are part of the Open Infra Foundation. What's also interesting about this slide here is that 2 of our nodes, QCIF, the Queensland Cyber Infrastructure Foundation, and Intersect, are significant trainer organisations for the research sector, and they're foundational members of our partnership that we run. They play a really key role in that. Okay, here's my transitional slide, where I move away from my material from the comms team and into my own slides. Okay, so I like to think about skills training as a Rubik's Cube. It's complicated and brightly coloured. The transition point is that I would like to, I want to spend my time on the hands, what the hands are doing, how the hands are solving the problem. Okay, it's not about the abstract concepts. It's how do we, work together, right? Okay, in order to solve the cube, and what are we doing to increase the efficacy of skills trainers in doing that? Okay, so now it's time to talk about the Carpentries. So they're a non-profit global volunteer organisation that trains people in software development and data science skills. They build community and local capacity through a Train the Trainer program, and that's what that's essentially the reason why we started this partnership, to give people easier access to becoming a Carpentries instructor. The focus for the Carpentries is on novice learners and also how to teach them. So, and I'll get into some of those factors now. So there are 3 lesson program areas to the Carpentries: software carpentry, data and library. Software carpentry is for people who are learning to code to develop software, so it tends to focus and be fairly domain independent. Data carpentry workshops tend to be domain targeted and teach researchers to work more effectively and reproducibly with discipline focused data sets. And library carpentry workshops are for people who want to build software and data skills managing collections. So this is where this might be of interest to people across the GLAM sector: galleries, libraries, archives and museums. Equally, some humanities, social science researchers may find the library carpentry curricula more relevant to them. And the idea about calling all of this Carpentries is that we use it to refer to the basics, like learning how to nail 2 boards together or putting up a wall straight. So the idea is, after attending a Carpentries workshop, researchers are enabled to come back to this computational area themselves with the confidence to try something new. Okay, why did we choose the Carpentries to uplift the trainer community? Let's look at the market landscape for digital skills training against 2 key drivers: community coming up the vertical axis, and open and reproducible methods coming along the bottom axis. Okay, so you can see up in the top right, the Carpentries there stood out as coming out on top for both of those areas. In fact, both ResBaz, and there is a ResBaz slide in here because I will always put one in. So I'll explain that if it's unfamiliar to you, offer that networking and collaboration. Both of those are about paying attention to the social nature of learning and doing research. So the first reason we initiated a partnership was because individual organisation memberships were not growing in the community. Actually, that might have been something I forgot to mention previously, that while the Carpentries is a volunteer organisation, they receive grant funding from their fiscally sponsored initiative from this an organisation called Community Initiatives in the United States, and then organisations become members, and that pays and those fees sustain the organisation. So what we wanted to do was create reasons for local coordination to renew and grow the existing instructor community, and also to encourage collaboration between institutions and broker relationships between them. It's one of those problems about digital skills trainers being isolated and siloed and not recognised in their official capacity, is that they're all because they were siloed. So we wanted to create a reason for those people to come together and contribute to a broader community. We also wanted to build capacity for digital research skills among Australian researchers and service providers, for example, QCIF and Intersect, and also increase the efficacy of digital skills trainers through the Train the Trainer program, which features pedagogical theory, evidence-based practice, and evaluation and assessment. So these are some of the organisations in our partnership. So people become a partner, join our partnership because they want a number of instructors trained per year. We take out the membership, that's on ARDC, and then we on-sell seats in that capacity. Our reach across Australia, also in addition to those two major training organisations, includes 2 HPC centres, and we have representation from universities from west to east, and research infrastructure from ARDC and ARNet. The new kids on the block are the Burnett Institute and AIMS, Australian Institute of Marine Science, and we're finding more interest growing from smaller groups, or on a lab size, almost a lab-sized interest, rather than a big institution. Okay. Last year, here are our 5 instructor trainers, so we call them trainers for short, and these trainers brought 85 researchers and research support people through our training last year. I'm going to tell you, and these are the numbers or that's the geographical spread of where we reached people. So one of the things that I do want to highlight is some of that assessment process. So when people go through undertake their instructor training, which is usually about 16 hours of workshop, and that's typically online. We also require them to participate online in a community discussion, to submit a contribution to a lesson repo on GitHub, and also to pass an online teaching demonstration, which trainers such as myself assess people on. If you are interested, so there are 2 ways that you could get involved in this kind of instructor training if you're starting to see some of these skills being relevant to you. One of those is for you to talk to your organisation about membership, taking out a Carpentries membership, or you could also come in through the Open Instructor EOI process. So I can show you how to get to that form. It's on the Carpentries website, but sort of hidden a bit. Okay. Right, well, here's the question in the room. Why do people become instructors? Often it's to gain greater insight into the tools that they're using. The old adage, you don't really know something until you've tried to teach someone else, is relevant here. So going a little bit deeper, some of those skills that we teach are about Git and using GitHub, the Unix shell, Python and R, and there is new curriculum developing all the time. But there are other benefits too to the community that the Carpentries support, and that includes by becoming a volunteer, it means you learn how to interact and learn a lot of interpersonal skills because you interact with a wide range of learners from a big range of backgrounds. We are a global organisation. You can also gain useful perspectives and adaptability through teaching audiences with different levels of skill, and also to develop research and teaching insights by instructing learners in disciplines other than your own. The other reason I reckon people stay involved or get involved in the Carpentries is that idea of serendipity. And I'm going to use the example of ResBaz to explain what I mean by serendipity. So for those of you unfamiliar with ResBaz, it's short for Research Bazaar. It started in Melbourne. Melbourne Uni started it off in 2015, and since then it has grown to be a very decentralised bunch of conferences for researchers that are all about bringing people together to access and learn about new tools and technology, solve practical problems, so we can translate research to society. Okay. So one thing that's great about ResBaz, because it tends to be city-based and an in-person event, is that you get people from different disciplines, different institutions, all in the same room, and you're in a learning environment together. So you are able to access that serendipity of, oh my goodness, we have exactly the same problem, even though we're at, either completely different disciplines and I wouldn't have met you otherwise, or we do exactly the same thing, but we're at different institutions. So that kind of serendipity that you get out of coming together with a bunch of friendly strangers who are all committed to building a community and have an interest in open tools and scholarship is probably something that everyone here knows about because you've been doing it by coming to this conference. And that's also why people join the Carpentries as well. In fact, ResBaz was formed on the basis of running Carpentries workshops at scale, okay, in a festival kind of environment. And it continues. But that's not the topic of my talk, unfortunately. So coming back to what I was trying to make myself do. Okay, so now it's the party time, but I think that kind of gives you false expectations about the quality of my slides from here on in. What programming challenges do researchers face? I'm not an expert, and I think you probably have a really good idea of this yourself. From my experience, one of the chief problems are, how do I get started? How do I learn these skills? How do I even know that these skills are relevant to me if I want to be able to access this research infrastructure and not piss off the developers and the tech support? So there's that problem space. Then there's also, where can I find support? So it is really hard for researchers to find and access the relevant folk who are available to support them in their tech endeavours at universities. And that's where things like, and I'll move into some examples of stuff that ARDC is doing to make visible that information. The final challenge here that I've got on this screen is about that concept of research quality software, which seems to be something that many people here know about and groan as much as they do towards my terrible puns. So encapsulated here, I've called it, my code is not good enough. My code is good enough for research, but not good enough for sharing. People don't want to see it. And that's one of the big challenges that we face in my sort of data librarian capacity, teaching data sharing and publishing skills, that people don't want to share data and don't want to share softly, mainly because they're embarrassed about what the community might think when they show it to each other. So there's a thing that I hopefully will come back to later in the summary. Okay, so a couple of things that ARDC are doing here. One of them is this portal, but realistically it's a metadata aggregator called Dresser. You could call it Dresser, but I think I'm just going to go full bogan and call it Dresser. I grew up near Bogan Gate, so I reserve the right to own that bogan and reform it from the inside. Okay, so what Dresser hopes to do, it's a portal, it's a place for, you probably can't see that tiny line there, browsing, discovering and organising digital research skills events and training resources collected from Australasian providers. So it's authenticated by AAF in Australia, and in New Zealand it's, I always forget the name of it. No, I can't remember. Starts with a T. Might have to re-record that section of the talk. So what Dresser hopes to do is to aggregate that information from as many Australian and New Zealand training events as possible into one portal and make it a meaningful place to start for researchers looking to find out what skills they need and what what training and support is available to them. So we pull that metadata from all of that from existing sites and put it together. There's also a place for trainers to create their own profile. So if you indeed are a trainer or have a trainer capacity in your role, I really encourage you to talk to me about creating a trainer profile and how we might bulk ingest your training calendar, that kind of thing. The other thing that I would like to share with this is the hilariously named ARDC software program, okay, which is a program, but it's not that kind of program. And two big things that the software program does is running a visible research software interest group, and they've got a Ask Me Anything meeting coming up at the end of this month. I'd like to encourage you to go to. And also, they have sponsored, or we have sponsored, a Eureka Prize for Excellence in Research Software. So this is exciting because it's $10,000, and it's something that is for anyone involved in building research software. So you could be an academic, or a researcher, but you could also be a research software engineer, and you would be welcome to apply for that prize. So I encourage you to explore that, or as the slide says, enter now. All right. Okay, so, I don't have notes there. So, here we go. What have I learned about community building? These are 3 out of the many things that I have learned, because I did want to get to what are those critical things involved in building community, and this is weird because often I feel that it's a liability of mine to not be able to work out what the priority is at any one time, because everything is important. We must do everything. But there are a lot of moving parts, and so getting buy-in from organisations at that sort of senior level is important, but equally important is paying attention to the grassroots communities on the ground and listening to why you are building communities. And for me, that means paying attention to that social side of learning. One of the great things about the Carpentries that I love to champion is how good they are at social infrastructure. So they have regular there are regional community calls that happen to help people come together and know who's who in their local communities. And when I say local in that context, actually it kind of means national groupings across the world. There's also a convention of running pre- and post-workshop debriefs for instructors, so that you can talk with other instructors about, I'm about to run a workshop for, data carpentry genomics workshop, and I'm going to work on this particular curricula, and I'm going to cut this other stuff. What do you think of my plans? And also it works for a debrief as well. So instructors are welcome to come in and talk about how they're using that. And of course, there are many roles across the Carpentries, whether you get involved in maintaining the open source curriculum, or as a maintainer, or as a community coordinator as well. So I guess finally, this is really just a bullet point for me, that mistakes mean that you're learning. So I'm pleased to say I now know the difference between the lyrics of MC Hammer and Vanilla Ice. And that's where I'm at. So here's our subscribe to the ARDC Connect newsletter business. And you can please come and talk to me about any of these questions, or I look forward to your questions, because I feel like I've just given you a lot of information here, and this could be the start of a beautiful journey, exploration, and I don't know, hammer time. Thank you.
If you could repeat the questions, because the mic doesn't catch.
Oh, okay, cool.
So have we got any questions? Yes.
Thanks, Liz. Oh, thanks, Liz. Great talk. You talked a little bit about, the community side of it, and that there's a lot of moving parts and the prioritisation piece. Talk more a little bit about that, and how do you choose what to do next? Like, what kind of prioritisation approaches do you use?
Damn. So the question was, how do I prioritise what to do next in that community building kind of space, and talk more about it? I suppose that could, I can answer that. I will answer that. So last year, we established our partnership. We had 11 partner organisations, and we basically went on this big drive to get lots of people in through our instructor training, and it was really intense, because there was, while we went out and sourced people who were to get that instructor training from across Australia, but when our trainers run our training, they also run training which can be attended by other members or instructor trainees from other member organisations. There are about 110 member organisations across the Carpentries worldwide. So that meant that we spent a lot of time focused on just delivering the instructor training. Okay, and so by the end of the year, I was exhausted and resolved never to run a training event in December ever again. This year, so in answer to bringing back to your question about like how do you decide what to do next, now we have a whole bunch of people who've gone through the training. Some of them have made it through to full certified instructor status, probably about a third of them actually. So it's still so our next big job is to help them through that. And so the things that we're doing to help them through that process is to start up some Australia, New Zealand regular community calls. There's one coming up in mid-April. And start and pay more attention to what it takes to help an instructor deliver their first workshop. So there's often a sense when you run a train the trainer program that all you need is an organisation who's going to pay the fee, and then people attend the training and then they're good to go. But what I've learnt through the Carpentries involvement is that that's actually just the first step, and then you need to really engage in a much deeper instructor onboarding program to find, for people at that local level, for them to find, well, who can I encourage or ask nicely to do the registration and the organising of the administration around the workshops? And how can I convince my my bosses to allow my peers to have time off to attend these workshops, or to spend staff time joining these workshops? So that's where we're going. And in fact, I would like to do less training this year and focus more on moving those people into demonstrating, or sort of, walking the talk of what they've learned last year. How's that for an answer? A bit more. Thank you.
I was wondering if you could speak to the relationship between Carpentries as a training organisation that's doesn't sound like it's necessarily closed, but at least is membership driven and internal like that, and the sort of an open community like the free and open source community more generally. The relationship between the resources that you've got, the ways that we can collaborate without necessarily becoming full members of a Carpentry organisation, or if open source communities can have access to materials without necessarily having access to specific training sessions. Is there any relationship here that to be built on or grown, or is it a sufficiently closed that the people in this room who aren't already members of those organisations could participate?
Yeah, that's a good question. Okay, so your question is about how do you talk more?
To collaborate with the broader open source ecosystem?
Right. Okay. And what? How can you get involved without necessarily becoming a member organisation or strong arming your senior admin into paying the fees? Yeah. So yes, because all of the curriculum is openly licensed. It all has an attribution, Creative Commons attributions license, and is hosted on GitHub. In fact, I think it's GitHub/Carpentries is the major repository there, and you can filter through and find things. And so that the maintenance of that lesson curriculum is all run through GitHub. So anyone is welcome to pop in and comment on an issue or and indeed use the curriculum. So you can definitely fork it and adjust it for your own needs. The membership part really focuses in if you want to make use of those materials at scale among your organisation, because then you can say that you're running a Carpentries workshop because you've got Carpentries certified instructors to run it. So I guess that's the reason for the membership tier. Yes, trademark, exactly. Thanks for bringing that up. Alternatively, there are, even in the trainer, in the instructor training space, you can join in through the Open Scholarship program. So if your organisation doesn't have the wherewithal and you want to do it on your own time, you are more than welcome to submit an expression of interest in those training programs, and then that gets assessed by the instructor training team. And I think because of the nature of what the Carpentries teach, whether it's teaching Python or R, teaching these skills about how to build software and work in ways that are open. I mean, from their point of view, it's building reproducibility skills among researchers, but it's not only researchers. Researchers are not the only people who have these skills at all by any means. So I guess it's about building that community, but I would say the open source community and open source software and development community is more than welcome to chip in with your expertise or explore ways that that could work, outside of that volunteer time.
So sorry everybody, that's out of time, so everybody give another round of applause for Liz.
Thank you.
And Liz.